In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, March 26th, here in South Korea. The government is holding off its license suspensions of protesting junior doctors as efforts are underway to set up a forum for talks between relevant authorities and medical practitioners over plans to reform Korea's healthcare. Also, on the local front, the latest annual report on Korea's demographic portrait shows the country's population plunging to 36 million by the year 2072, with people aged 65 and above accounting for almost half of that number. Meanwhile, on the international front, for the first time, the United Nations Security Council passes a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas in devastated Gaza. Administrative procedures involving license suspensions of protesting junior doctors have been put on hold, but the government has reaffirmed its resolve to keep its expansion size intact regardless of the ongoing opposition from the medical arena. Our Yongin has the latest.
The Korean government has made it clear that it'll stick to its original plan to increase the medical school admissions quota.
As of March 20th, we've finalized the expansion of the country's medical school quota by 2,000 for the 2025 academic year, along with sorting out allocations for each school. We're moving ahead smoothly with the next steps, such as incorporating these changes into university admissions. The government will complete follow-up measures by May.
License suspensions of doctors who have walked out in opposition to the government's plan were set to start on Tuesday. However, the government has decided to postpone this decision, stating that it could not implement such measures while attempting to engage in dialogue with the medical community.
In light of President Yoon Suk-yeol's call for dialogue with the medical community, we're taking steps to swiftly organize discussions. We urge the medical community to join these talks without conditions, bearing in mind the patients who rely on your care.
But it appears there's still a long road ahead for dialogue.
Unless the government withdraws its plan to increase the medical school quota and allocation, this crisis cannot be resolved. We are ready to discuss all pending issues in front of the public, but I don't believe withdrawing the plan equals to eliminating the expansion entirely.
The Korean Medical Association, made up of around 140,000 doctors, is set to elect its new leader on Tuesday. Given that both final candidates have voiced opposition to the government's plan, there is speculation that the incoming leadership may push for an even larger scale walkout. And it's expected that more professors from the country's medical schools will submit their resignations in solidarity with trainee doctors. Some schools witnessed the majority of their professors resigning on Monday, including 433 out of 767 at Ulsan University. To minimize disruption to patient care, the government says it will deploy an additional 1,900 physician-assisted nurses alongside the current 5,000 deployed. 송유진, Arirang News.
Prospects of inflation among consumers here in the country rose for the first time in 5 months in March. According to the Bank of Korea on this Tuesday, consumers expect to see an inflation rate of 3.2% over the next year, up 0.2 percentage points on month. Bank officials linked the rise to higher grocery bills, including those for fruits. We've been reporting on Korea's bleak demographic future for some time now, and the latest annual projection is doing little to allay related concerns. In fact, the country's population is predicted to plunge to 36 million by the year 2072, with people aged 65 and above accounting for almost half of that number. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
As the number of births in South Korea plummets, the country's population is also on a downward spiral. That's according to the annual report on Korean society released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, which showed that South Korea's population came to just over 51 million in 2023. It's forecast to drop to as low as 36 million by 2072, with some stark differences in the proportion of age groups in the population. Last year, those aged 15 to 64 made up the majority of the population at just under 71%. But less than 50 years from now, this age group is expected to be around 46% of the population, with people aged 65 and above making up the majority at over 47%. This bleak projection comes on the back of the lowest fertility rates the country has seen since data was first compiled in 1970. In 2023, the fertility rate in Korea, the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, dipped to 0.72 births. The total number of births recorded came to around 230,000, and this is less than a half of the total tallied in 2012. This figure has seen a consistent decline since the 2000s, considering in 2000 around 640,000 babies were born. This fell to the 400,000 range from 2002 to 2016, picking up pace and falling to the 300,000 range between 2017 and 2019, and down to the 200,000 range from 2020. Data from the same report also show that more and more people are choosing to live alone. The percentage of single-person households in South Korea was 34.5% in 2022, compared to around 27% 7 years before that. The percentage of single-person or two-person households have seen an upward trend over the years, while those with 3 or more people have seen a consistent drop, showing the social trend where fewer people are choosing to get married or have children. A survey conducted by Statistics Korea last year showed social issues that affect an aging population, with many of those aged over 60 years old saying that they felt lonely or that they felt nobody really knew or understood them. While on average, the proportion of people across all age groups responding that they felt lonely dropped by 0.7 percentage points compared to the year before. A higher percentage of people in their 50s and 60s said they felt lonely compared to younger age groups. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, earlier on Monday, President Yoon Suk-yeol was in Yongin City, that is, Gyeonggi-do province, where he pledged transport and housing infrastructure to better support a regional semiconductor cluster. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young covers his remarks.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has promised new homes, roads and urban facilities to support a mega semiconductor cluster centred on Yongin City in Gyeonggi-do province. This came on Monday as he held the 23rd edition of his series of public policy discussions with citizens. Returning to Yongin, where he held his first policy talk on building a semiconductor mega cluster in the wider province, Yoon laid out plans to scale up the quality of work and life in the city through supportive infrastructure projects. As chip giants Samsung and SK Hynix invest some 500 trillion won or $372 billion into the city as the axis of the semiconductor belt, according to the government's estimates, new residents and commuters are expected to flood in to top 1.5 million in the near future.
용인이 이렇게 커 나가기 위해서는 행정, 교통, 주거를 비롯해서 민생과 직결된 인프라를 확실하게 구축하는 것이 가장 중요합니다.
This includes a semiconductor expressway stretching across the cities of Yongin, Hwasong and Ansong. Yoon also said the national highway Route 45 will be expanded, along with improved roads and railway lines connecting the provincial cities to enable an easier commute. To upgrade urban livelihoods for new city dwellers, Yongin will create a residential and cultural complex town along with smaller townships to provide quality housing and amenities for the younger generations and senior citizens. A new semiconductor Meister High School will also open in Yongin to foster a local talent pool for the surrounding chip industry. To facilitate these plans, the government will push to enact a law on special cities to give them more decision-making authority for their respective development projects.
아울러 시립박물관과 시립예술관 설립에 관한 중앙정부의 권한을 지역으로 대폭 이관해서 자유롭게 설립할 수 있도록 하고 청년들이 용인에서 문화예술 기량을 마음껏 펼치고 창작 기회를 누릴 수 있도록 함과 아울러서 시민들의 문화예술 접근권도 높이겠습니다.
Yongin, along with Changwon, Suwon and Goyang, have been designated as special cities with more than 1 million residents. Last year, Yongin was selected as a candidate site to build a national industrial complex and became part of the government's plan to foster a 21 million square metre semiconductor mega cluster across Gyeonggi-do province. The cluster is expected to be the largest in the world by 2047 and capable of producing 7.7 million wafers per month by the year 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
On a solemn note now, today, that is March 26, South Korea remembers the 46 service members who died when North Korea torpedoed their vessel, the Cheonan warship, back in the year 2010. Touching upon the tragedy at a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol warned North Korea against provocation, asserting that it will not be tolerated. He also condemned North Korea's illegal and inhumane detainment of South Korean prisoners of war and abductees, demanding their immediate return. He also noted that back in August last year, Seoul, Washington and Tokyo shared their intentions to address the issue of abductees, detainees and prisoners of war being held by North Korea. The UN Security Council has passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in violent confrontations between Israel and Hamas that have devastated Gaza. Our Shin Se-byuk reports.
The United Nations Security Council on Monday adopted a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. The resolution, which passed 14-0 with the U.S. abstaining, demands an immediate ceasefire that could lead to a permanent and sustainable truce. It also called for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. This marks the first time the Security Council has adopted a resolution demanding a ceasefire related to the situation in Gaza.
This bloodbath has continued for far too long. It is our obligation to put an end to this bloodbath before it is too late.
The U.S. explained its reasons for abstention, stating that while it agrees a ceasefire is necessary, it believes certain, quote, key edits were missing in the resolution.
Certain key edits were ignored, including our request to add a condemnation of Hamas.
The White House National Security Advisor John Kirby stated in a briefing later the same day that the U.S. decision not to exercise its veto does not indicate a shift in U.S. policy direction. Kirby added that the U.S. backed a ceasefire but did not support the resolution because the text did not condemn Hamas. Following the adoption, Hamas welcomed the UNSC resolution, saying it was ready to engage in an immediate prisoner swap with Israel. Meanwhile, Israel, which has consistently opposed a ceasefire on the grounds that it would solely benefit Hamas, expressed particular dissatisfaction with the United States for not using its veto power this time. This led to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu abruptly canceling the planned visit of a high-level delegation to the U.S. next week. The White House expressed its very disappointment over Netanyahu's decision, but said talks between U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant would go ahead. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Also, on the international front, while acknowledging the role of radical Islamists in the tragic killings of innocent people at a Russian music venue last Friday, President Vladimir Putin insists the mastermind behind the massacre is Ukraine. Our Islamists covers his comments.
For the first time since the deadly terror attack at the ROKS City Hall near Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledged that radical Islamists were behind the attack that killed at least 139 people, including 3 children.
We know that the crime was committed by the hands of radical Islamists, followers of an ideology that the Islamic world itself has been fighting against for centuries.
However, despite ISIS releasing a 90-second video claiming responsibility for the deadly terror attack, Putin insisted that Ukraine was ultimately behind the attack.
And immediately a question arises, who benefits from this? This atrocity may just be a link in a whole series of attempts by those who have been at war with our country since 2014 by the hands of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. And the Nazis, as is well known, have never hesitated to use the dirtiest and most inhumane means to achieve their goals.
Washington once again refuted the accusation, calling it a propaganda campaign by the Kremlin, emphasizing that the Islamic State alone carried out the attack and had no connection with Ukraine. France also contradicted Putin, saying that their intelligence indicate radical Islamists were behind the attack and not Ukraine. Meanwhile, at a counterterrorism meeting chaired by Putin, the head of the committee investigating Friday's terror attack said it was carefully planned and prepared. It also said that all 4 key suspects, all of whom were Tajikistan nationals, pleaded guilty in court and testified in detail about the instructions given to them before carrying out the deadly attack. It's been reported that 3 more men from Tajikistan have been detained on suspicion of helping prepare the terrorist attack. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here in Korea, rural development authorities are working to better support initiatives aimed at tailoring technology for local farms to allow for greater productivity at lower costs. Our Chung Eun-ju explains.
This is brewer's spent grain, or BSG, the leftover residue from making beer. It contains twice as much protein as flour with fewer calories, making it highly nutritious. This Hanu cattle farm uses BSG mixed with hay to produce high-quality fiber-mixed feed. While maintaining the Hanu grade, the farm has saved about 350,000 won, or roughly $260 in feed per 2 cattle.
The cost of feed, which was about 4 million won, dropped to the mid 2 million to early 3 million range, while the cattle grade is similar.
Spring onions grow in this hydroponic farm where nutrients are supplied to crops through pipes. Unlike open fields, hydroponic farms are not affected by weather, soil, or pests, and farmers don't have to stoop down to work, which makes farming easier. From being harvested twice a year in the open field, it's now possible to harvest up to 8 times a year with hydroponic cultivation.
With hydroponic cultivation, it's possible to harvest 4 to 8 times, and the profit is generally 3 to 4 times higher than in open fields.
This transport robot follows workers and assists with labor. It can operate continuously for over 10 hours and carry up to 300 kilograms. According to an analysis of the effects of the new technology distribution project promoted by the Rural Development Administration last year, income and productivity increased by over 30%, while production costs were reduced by 26%.
To enhance agricultural competitiveness, rapid distribution of developed technologies is crucial. We plan to actively promote customized new technology dissemination projects to meet the needs.
The Rural Development Administration plans to invest 64.2 billion won, or roughly $48 million this year, a 16% increase from last year, to carry out 134 new technology distribution projects. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
In other news, weddings cost money, and for the less fortunate, this callous reality keeps them from being able to share their wedding vows in front of family and friends. Accordingly, government officials here are seeking to offer some support. Our Choi Soo-young shows us how.
The groom and the bride bow to each other. After 6 years, Mr. Lee Il-duk and Ms. Park Kyo-shim finally had the wedding they had always wanted. Their faces lit up with bright smiles. Monday's wedding was made even more special with the traditional matrimonial ceremony being held in Korea House in central Seoul. Both the bride and groom are defectors from North Korea. Park fled North Korea in 2011 and settled in South Korea in 2018. But she struggled a lot, living as a single mother. A year later, she met Lee, and they formed a family, having 2 more children and sharing a common bond as North Korean defectors.
I got married because I wanted to be by his side. I support him whenever we struggle or are affected by illness.
However, due to financial difficulties, they couldn't even dream of holding a wedding ceremony.
My wife really wanted the wedding. Overall, everyone helped us enormously in everything. So we're really grateful. Thank you so much.
The South Korean government is actively supporting vulnerable families, including defectors like Ms. Park and Mr. Lee. As part of such support, the Cultural Heritage Administration and Korea House provide a traditional wedding ceremony and first birthday party free of charge to those in financial difficulties. These free ceremonies, including hair and makeup, dress and a reception, will be provided weekly until November 4th.
I hope that South and North Korea can become one, just like the meaning of a marriage becoming one. That's why we invited them first. It would be meaningful for defectors, our brothers and sisters, to be the first to have this traditional wedding ceremony.
Korea House Director Kim said they plan to expand the service next year to provide more people with opportunities and thus promote the beauty of Korean tradition. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. Following a New York judge's ruling on Monday, former US President Donald Trump's hush money trial is set to begin on April 15th. The new trial date means that Trump will become the first ever former US president to go on trial for criminal charges. Judge Juan M. Merchan on Monday scolded the ex-president's legal team for a last-minute document dump to postpone the original trial date. Trump's team argued that prosecutors deliberately concealed thousands of pages of records from a prior federal investigation. But Judge Merchan appeared unconvinced by the claims of prosecutorial misconduct, which he suggested to be groundless. A separate New York appeals court ruled on the same day that Trump did not have to pay $454 million fraud penalty ahead of his appeal, as long as he posts a smaller $175 million bond within 10 days. The $175 million bond is a victory for the ex-president, as it will block New York state authorities from processing the seizure of his assets. In Nigeria, some 137 school children have returned home after they were rescued on Sunday. They were kidnapped from the rural Kaduna state town of Kuriga and had spent more than 2 weeks in captivity. The children, many of them below the age of 10, were abducted from their school by gunmen on motorcycles on March 7th, triggering a rescue operation. 6 of the 137 students remain hospitalized, while a senior military official said that one staff member who was kidnapped with the children died in captivity. The school initially reported that a total of 287 students were kidnapped during the attack, but according to Kaduna's governor, Uba Sani, only 137 children were confirmed to have been abducted. Now to the UK's capital, where a convoy of more than 100 tractors drove to the British Parliament in protest against recent trade deals and cheap food imports. Farmers, some with Union Jack flags and banners with slogans including "No farmers, no food, no future," demanded that the government improve the country's food security by enforcing more accurate food labelling. They also called for an end to post-Brexit trade deals that allow the import of substandard, cheaper foods. Organisers Save British Farming and Fairness for Farmers of Kent echoed the message that unsupportive policies were putting the British food industry at risk. A Russian spacecraft docked at the International Space Station on Monday with 3 passengers, one each from the US, Russia and Belarus. The 3 members were Oleg Novitsky from Russia, Marina Vasilyevskaya from Belarus, and Tracy Dyson from the US. The ISS now has a total population of 10. The Soyuz MS-25 spacecraft launched on Saturday with a 2 days delay after the initial launch was aborted due to a chemical power source issue. Space is one of the few remaining areas of cooperation between the US and Russia. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Hope you're adjusting well to the changeable weather these days. Rain that has been soaking the country since yesterday is letting up from the west, and the skies will turn cloudy by the time you head home from work. But as you can see, a mix of rain and snow continues through the evening in the east of Gangwon-do province. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see up to 15 centimeters of spring snow with heavy snow alerts in place, while a wind advisory has been issued for the southeast coast and Jeju Island today. Rain brought a chill to the country. After a breezier start, highs should go up to similar to yesterday in most places. Seoul topping out at 13 degrees, but Busan and Jeju only make it to 11 degrees Celsius. Those of us in the west, however, can look forward to a partial sunshine by the mid-afternoon. There will be a rise in highs tomorrow, then a chance of more rain for Thursday, but the weather looks more promising towards the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. And those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us. Thank you for now.